Production of Kansas City Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Coming up, what you need to know ahead of local elections Tuesday on both sides of state line. Plus, what's the cost of religious freedom? Is the school funding issue finally solved in Kansas? And unpacking Amazon's plans to bring 1,000 jobs to Johnson County. Hello, those stories and more straight ahead. I'm Nick Haynes. It's good to have you with us again. In fact, it's been so long since I sat in this chair, we could call this week's edition Kansas City Month in Review. But up to that challenge are this week's reviewers from the Cole newspaper, senior writer Eric Wesson, from the Pitch, reporter Steve Vockrodt, from the Kansas City Star, City Hall reporter Lynn Horsley, and Star political reporter, columnist and blogger Dave Helling. Now, if you live or work in Kansas City, you've no doubt seen signs like this one sprouting up pretty much everywhere. There are a bit of vacant space on the side of a street after what seems like a year-long campaign by city leaders to coax Kansas City voters to renew what is called the 1% earnings tax. That election is on Tuesday. What's at stake in this election, Lynn Horsley?
Well, a big part of the general fund that pays for police department, fire department, trash collection, a little bit of it goes for street maintenance, about $240 million.
Now, there has been arguments, of course, for not continuing with the tax. If you live or work in Kansas City, the earnings tax is costing you, on average, $340 a year. The average business paying $2,050 on their net profits. Only 25 of the largest 150 cities have an earnings tax. Other cities clearly survive without an earnings tax, from close by Omaha and Oklahoma cities to big cities like Atlanta and Orlando. So why not Kansas City, Steve?
Well, so Kansas City over time has assembled a budget that depends maybe quite heavily on the earnings tax, I think is fair to say. So Kansas City's got this $1.5 billion budget, but the context of that is, generally about a third of that is for water and sewer, can't be used for other things. The aviation department occupies about a third of that, can't be shifted around, or at least theoretically isn't supposed to be. And then the rest of that is for a lot of the general services that Lynn Horsley mentioned, and the E-tax funds a major portion of that. And since the 60s, Kansas City's just become very used to having the earnings tax.
We were at a forum, Eric Wesson, just recently at Emmanuel Cleaver's church on the earnings tax, and a number of people there were concerned about the earnings tax, saying they wouldn't support this because people at the Cerner Corporation weren't paying the earnings tax. Cerner wasn't paying the earnings tax. Are there companies and employees who don't pay the earnings tax?
There probably are. The mayor says that the only people that don't pay it, that are exempt, are senior citizens that are living off of Social Security. The opponents of it say, yeah, you have these people that aren't paying it and these people that are. But Cerner's argument is been, in my conversations with them, is that we employ so many people and we do this and we do that, that we don't pay portions of the earnings tax.
Well, the individual workers at Cerner certainly do pay the earnings tax. Now, a part of that for this giant development out in Bannister is going to be allowed to be repurposed into reimburse Cerner for the development. And of course, city officials would say, well, that development wouldn't occur if they didn't get that tax break. But it's not like the employees don't have to pay the tax.
Well, that is one of the issues, though, of opponents, isn't it, Dave Helling, that it's quite a big portion of the money is going towards paying off these for tax giveaways?
Well, right. The argument from some opponents of the earnings tax is that these diversions, if they were to be stopped, would actually provide enough money for police and fire, and that the city council and city hall generally needs to do a better job of spending its money before it asks its residents and the people who work there to pay 1% of their earnings every year to 12th and Oak. My own view has always been that the idea that somehow Kansas City can't live with this tax is a bit of a red herring, because cities, as you note, all over the country don't have an earnings tax. They still have police and fire. The question is this the best way to raise money for government? It could be. I mean, the negative side is it hurts the poor, maybe a disincentive. But the biggest argument for the tax is that other people pay it. No tax is more popular than one you don't have to pay. And I was talking to somebody the other day and suggested if the federal government got half its revenue from Canada, the people in the United States would not vote to say, no, I think we'll pay for all of that ourselves. So the fact that half of the money comes from outside of Kansas City is its strongest selling point, and that's why I think it'll pass.
We hear the mayor and other city leaders say, oh, if this is eliminated and voters say no, we're going to have to cut back on police and firefighters and, all hell is going to break loose. But the legislation in Missouri states that the city would have actually 10 years to actually see this be eliminated. It's up to 10 years. So wouldn't the city have plenty of time to find out another method to collect this revenue, Eric?
Yes, they would have 10 years to find another way to do it. But unfortunately, it seems like unless they come up with some other way to do it, it would be taxes on sales tax increase, property tax increase, and then you'd have a situation where seniors on Social Security would now actually have to pay to help fund the tax. So I think that would be the downfall of not passing it.
There would certainly be cuts, and there would also be attempts to enhance the revenues. They'd have to go back to the state to get permission to raise the sales tax substantially or the property tax. And raising the property tax would also be a huge disincentive for businesses to come into the city. So if you argue the earnings tax is a disincentive, the alternative isn't much better and could be worse.
Opponents say this is already costing jobs and a number of people who don't come into the city because there is such a thing as the 1% earnings tax. What is the evidence for that, though, Steve?
I don't know that I've seen any. I mean, it's almost proving a negative to say, well, this company would have come here except for the earnings tax. There's some small isolated examples of companies that said, we took the opportunity to go to Leawood, for instance, because we don't have the earnings tax. I would say, related still on the topic of the earnings tax is, if the last year has taught us anything, it's that Kansas City probably really needs to plan for an alternative, because not only do you have these votes every 5 years, you also have legislative attempts. There's lawmakers introducing a myriad of different bills that seek to reduce or eliminate the earnings tax in different ways. And if a Republican governor gets in this next election, I think there's probably a decent chance that something like that
But you see any
pass.
evidence that type of planning is actually happening at City Hall then?
No, you don't, because I think the city feels like they really are dependent on this tax. And if we also want an example that reducing income taxes creates huge job growth, look at the state of Kansas. I think we have a case study right here that may not be the best theory.
One other thing, when we talk about other cities that don't have the earnings tax, because I think I did a story about it this week, and there's like 325 cities in the United States that have a form of the tax. But one of the things that sets Kansas City apart from those other cities is the land mass. Kansas City is an extremely large city, and to have as many police that we have to cover as much land as there is, then that's a big difference in
We're having a great little debate here, aren't we,
Yes,
Nick?
absolutely.
The pros and cons of this tax. Can I just say briefly this? The original sin for Kansas City is not necessarily the earnings tax, which has been here for 50 years. But over the years, in addition to the earnings tax, Kansas City has raised the sales tax repeatedly to a high level, and it now has nowhere to go if it loses the earnings tax. Kansas City's tax system overall is highly regressive. It hammers the poor. A 1% across the board tax on earnings is regressive by definition, and its high sales tax is regressive. Kansas City needs to look not only at what would happen if they lose the earnings tax, but a strong look at all of the ways it raises money so that it's more progressive and hurts the rich more than the poor.
Well, the earnings tax is not the only item being decided on Tuesday in local elections. On both sides of state line, there are city council and mayoral races all over the metro, plus school board elections. In the Kansas City School District, you'll see a whole page of races on your ballot with no names of candidates attached to them, except a blank line inviting you to write in a name of your choice. So you can literally write anything, Eric?
You can write, I don't even think people know whose name to write on there, who has declared that they were running as a write-in candidate. But it's my understanding that Brian Dial had the signatures, but they disqualified a lot of them because they weren't in that district that he was running.
Can you refresh my memory as to why the school board is in that situation? Now, some people may look at it and say there's no interest, but others may say people only run for office when they see a problem or there's anger and resentment. The fact that nobody is running, does that show that people are happy with the school district?
I think that shows the disconnect, that people just don't care and they've abandoned it. You have some people that are write-in candidates that have said, hey, I care about what happens in the direction, but I think for the most part, people are just disengaged from the district.
The other thing is, to be on the ballot, you need to gather petition signatures.
200 signatures.
And go door to door. And instead, lots of candidates just bypass that provision, file as write-in candidates.
But 200 signatures, is that really prohibitive?
Well, it is for a school board race if you can do it another way, and the way you do it is file as a write-in, and you can skip that weekend of having to go door to door.
But people normally don't write names in. They want to get in, and when they actually show up to vote, they don't want to have an extra step of having to write a name in.
Well, over in Kansas, Steve Ockrott, there are also local elections going on. In the city of Mission, you write that could council races there be a referendum on the site of the former Mission Mall site that is a decade after being demolished is still a vacant hole with no agreement on whether to proceed on with plans to put a Walmart there.
Right. So there are a few seats up for election in Mission, and why that's critical is because the developer of the Walmart-anchored Mission Gateway site, he wants about $29 million worth of tax incentives to make his project work. And in Mission, in order to pass a tax subsidy of that type, you need to have a supermajority, which means 6 of the 8 votes. And in talking with all of the candidates who are running for this race, I get the sense that unless they change their mind substantially, or if the plan changes substantially after they get elected, he may not have the votes to even get the incentives, and then he's in a real bind.
So we'll be talking about this project for another decade on Kansas City Week in Review?
Oh, yes.
Well, you know, Tom Valeni, the developer of this project, once joked in front of a bunch of people in Mission that, you know, he said, this project isn't going to take me 16 years to accomplish like one of my other projects did somewhere else. Well, the clock's running on Tom Valeni and coming up soon.
Back in Kansas City, Missouri, Mayor Sly James was delivering his State of the City address this week, but you could be forgiven for thinking the only thing worthwhile from his hour-long presentation was him singing.
And I love you, dear, but just how long can I keep singing the same old song? I'm going back to Kansas City.
This footage was pretty much the biggest coverage the mayor got from his address at the Uptown Theatre. Other than his penchant for singing, what did we learn from his speech, if anything, that we didn't already know, Lynn Horsley?
Well, it was a long laundry list of accomplishments. You know, the mayor has this theme of education and enforcement and efficiency, and so he outlined all of the things he's done to bolster those priorities. You know, these speeches are required. I think it's required in the city charter, but they're kind of anachronisms. The best part of the mayor's State of the City speech was actually these videos of other people talking about how they've been inspired and they've gotten involved in city initiatives, possibly through the mayor's leadership. But, you know, I think the mayor feels like Kansas City is on a roll. That may be more because of the Kansas City Royals than anything City Hall has done. So,
and is the success of the Kansas City Royals because of Sly James, Eric Wesson?
No, I don't think he was catching any fielders or grounders or hitting any.
He hits about
ball.
220, isn't that right?
Yeah,
Little power.
I'm thinking 180. But there are some accomplishments, and this was a platform in which he was able to do it and kind of tie this into the earnings tax and talk about some of the things that are being done. And I noticed that in a great degree they're focusing on the east side to try to counter some of the negative things that the taxes are saying there's no development in the east side, nothing's been done, and I think he used this platform to kind of show people, yes, there are things being done. It's not as much as you would like to see, but we're doing the best.
You know, the city recently announced with great hoopla that they were selling eyesore vacant homes to anyone who wanted them for $1. Did this lead to a modern-day gold rush? More than 130 blighted houses up for grabs for less than a cup of coffee? The deadline for getting that deal is today. What has been the response, Lynn?
Well, it's not been overwhelming, and let me put it this way.
Even at $1? Okay.
The city has not sugarcoated this. Ted Anderson, who is the head of the land bank, said publicly, these are bad houses. They're falling apart. They've got terrible roofs. All their mechanical systems are, crumbling. You would have to be a really competent rehabber to buy one of these houses and put the tens of thousands of dollars into it to make it worth living in. I think they've gotten about 40 or 45 credible applications, and again, the deadline isn't till the end of today. So if they can get a third of these 130 really terrible properties rehabbed instead of having to demolish them, that's positive. That's a positive result.
Now, in his State of the City address, Mayor James decried Missouri lawmakers pushing a religious freedom amendment. The Kansas City mayor claimed it would be a tremendous loss for the city with a mass exodus of major sporting events.
This is a political ideology issue. It's a rebellion against the Supreme Court's decision regarding gay marriage.
The NCAA has taken a stance on, they want to go to communities and cities and states they're welcoming. And they see this as legislation that's not welcoming for their student athletes and their universities and fans.
Now, what evidence, though, is there that sporting events won't come to Kansas City or to Missouri if state lawmakers vote to put on the ballot this amendment that its backers argue simply provides legal protections to religious organizations who, because of their faith, don't want to provide service to same-sex wedding ceremonies,
Well,
Dave?
there is evidence that the NCAA, for example, is rethinking its appearances in states that consider this, not just Missouri, but other states are also taking up similar legislation. But I do think, Nick, that it's largely about symbolism on both sides. The actual practical effect of a religious amendment in the Constitution would probably be very small, but it's very symbolic for many groups. And so sports groups, and by the way, other non-athletic related conventions and others are rethinking it because of the symbology of it. It's, both sides are using it for their purposes, which is not unique in Missouri or other states.
Let's take a closer look at this amendment's language, by the way. It blocks religious organizations from being punished from withholding service to same-sex wedding ceremonies. That means they couldn't be taxed or fined or denied a state license, accreditation, or state contract because of their actions. But the amendment does spell out that there is no prohibition on the state issuing marriage licenses or providing any other marital benefits to same-sex couples, and it specifically states that healthcare facilities cannot refuse to treat a marriage as valid for purposes of spouses' right to visitation or to make surrogate healthcare decisions. So this is not immediately, though, going to become law in the state of Missouri. This has passed the Senate. It has to still be approved by the House, and only then will it go to voters to decide. So why are businesses then showing their hands so quickly on this, Steve?
Well, so there are some businesses, a lot of them in Kansas City, who are clearly unhappy about this bill because, the image that it creates in the state of Missouri, as we've discussed, that it's unwelcoming, and it's, this is, let me be clear, this isn't a very well-written bill, and if you look at it, you don't have to have a law degree to really see how this. The tenets of this bill could be stretched far beyond, the classic, florist not wanting to put together a bouquet for a gay couple that's getting married. You can see how it can extend to other services, say perhaps a limousine service taking somebody a family member who's in town to go to a same-sex marriage. They could maybe cite their objections. So it creates a lot of uncertainty for businesses as well, and that's one reason that many businesses, and I would point out some religious organizations and churches here in Kansas City are actually very opposed to this.
Well, Kansas has not enacted a similar amendment, but last year Governor Sam Brownback issued an executive order protecting clergy and churches from lawsuits if they refuse to participate in same-sex marriages. This session's target, though, is not gay marriage, but transgender bathrooms. While we were in our spring membership drive, Kansas legislators introducing bills in the House and Senate calling for all public schools to label restrooms by gender, and in a move that goes further than any other measure across the country, enables students who encounter a person of the opposite sex in their restroom to sue the school for $2,500 for any emotional or physical harm suffered. Now, would lawmakers be pushing for these changes if they didn't feel their constituents were supporting it, Dave?
No, they're pushing for it so that we're all distracted from the real problems that face the state of Kansas about its inability to pay its bills in a timely manner. I mean, that's what all of this is about, Nick, and I've been on this show for a long time. It is a repeated story in Missouri and Kansas. legislation is offered to distract people from what the real problems are and to raise money, political money, to make political points, to put something on a postcard in your mailbox in August or November. That's what's happening in Kansas. To some degree, the fight over the resolution in Missouri is the same story. There are serious problems in both states. Lawmakers seem addicted to the idea of arguing things that don't really make a huge amount of difference, except as symbols. They're important as symbols. I mean, I'm not denying that the Missouri debate says something about Missouri, or the transgender debate says something about Kansas, but it's much more important, those bills, for what they say than what they actually do.
Stay in Kansas for a moment, because one of the big issues there has been the issue of school funding. Republican supermajorities in the Kansas legislature have approved a new plan to reshuffle education spending, hoping to head off the state Supreme Court's threat to shut down public schools statewide. Now, the deadline set by the courts to see action was June 30th. So Republican leaders said they were moving quickly to allow the court plenty of time to review the plan ahead of that deadline. Does this plan ensure schools will reopen again in August, Steve Ockrott?
Well, we won't know that until the Supreme Court weighs in. And the attorneys who are representing the school districts that are suing over this very issue seem to think that they don't this latest plan doesn't really go far enough to really address the shortcomings that district courts and the Supreme Court has pointed out over and over again. And let's not forget that there's still another shoe that's waiting to drop in this whole issue, which is the adequacy, the overall adequacy of determining whether Kansas schools are funded to a constitutionally acceptable level. So far, they've been working on the distribution from one school district to the next and whether that's equitable. If the Supreme Court comes back and says that it is inadequately funded, then Kansas has a major crisis in how it's going to fund and continue to operate schools into the future.
For most people, though, this gets awfully complicated. The language is complicated. The political conversation is complicated. Bottom line, people just want to know, are those schools going to open in August?
Almost certainly the answer is yes. There may be some pushing and shoving over this attempted fix on the fairness portion by June 30th, but the schools, barring just an absolute meltdown, will open. And I think the adequacy part that Steve just talked about probably won't be decided until after the November elections. So it's really an issue for 2017. But it won't go away, and Kansas's financial problems haven't gone away either.
I think they move it back. It might not open in August, but I believe they move it back to September and get away with it based upon the number of hours and weeks the kids have to be in school. And I also look for them, as other teachers have said, to go to a half a day to start the school year out, so that way they can get some funding, save some money, maybe reappropriate some money in some other areas. One of the legislators there said that that's an option that he's looking at presenting to other legislators so that they get by the crunch, because if not, they're in a world of trouble.
Sly James delivered his State of the City address this week. Last week, the head of Johnson County was delivering his State of the County message, and Ed Eilert used his annual platform to berate Kansas lawmakers over a law that forces cities and counties to put to a public vote any measure that increases property tax increases above the rate of inflation.
Why would legislative leaders want to put brakes on economic growth and job creation by forcing cities and counties to make those economic development decisions with the restriction of tax lids and spatial elections? Success for our state cannot be achieved if our economic development hands are tied behind our backs.
But so what makes this different, though, than how Missouri-side cities and counties have had to operate? If you want to raise taxes, they all have to be put to a public vote in Missouri, isn't that the case?
I mean, yes, Ed Eilert is talking about the state of Missouri. In Missouri, if you want to raise taxes, you have to have a vote of the people.
And anything that happens in Kansas City, Missouri, where you want to raise a tax, that has to go for a public vote.
Right, and Dave earlier was talking about the mix of taxes that Kansas City has to fund its city government. All of those taxes have been voter approved. Now, they've tried to float some things like the streetcar expansion that did not pass, but again, the voters had their say. But I get Ed's point. It's sometimes easier if you just have a representative government and you leave it up to those folks to make these tax decisions. But in Missouri, the voters have a lot of power.
So what are they worried about then, Steve?
Well, so Ed Eilert is probably worried about whether cities and the county can generate the funding that they need to operate government, as they've been seeing cutbacks in state appropriations to those counties and cities. It's interesting that Ed Eilert took the tone that he did, because a year ago when he gave the same speech, and we talked about it around this table at this time, it was very rosy and upbeat, and he left the legislature kind of untouched with his speech. And so it's interesting that his tone has changed over the year. I think he sees the critical issues that are facing the county that are being neglected by the state's financial crisis.
There is a major difference between Missouri, what Missouri does and what Kansas contemplates, and that is the Hancock Amendment in Missouri applies to cities and counties, but it also applies to the state government itself. So Missouri has to go to voters if it wants a fuel tax increase or whatever. In Kansas, by contrast, legislators are quite happy to impose lids on local government, but don't impose that state voter requirement on themselves and raise taxes at a historic level as a
But
result.
will Johnson County even need to be thinking of raising taxes as they become awash in new cash? You heard that global internet giant Amazon has announced it's opening a major new distribution center in the southwest corner of Johnson County in Edgerton. 1,000 upfront jobs are promised, with plans for up to 2,000 according to local economic development officials. Presumably this must also help Kansas Governor Sam Brownback tick off a number of boxes on the number of jobs he's created. Steve?
No, I would point out that this project in Edgerton comes about a year to 18 months after Amazon closed a similar type of facility in Coffeyville, which is in southeast Kansas. 635 full-time jobs, and rounded out to about another 400 contract jobs. So it's really just shuffling jobs from one area to another. Even when Sam Brownback wins, he loses, and this is another case of that.
All right, that is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our news reviewers from The Pitch, Steve Vokrot, and from The Star, Dave Helling. Star City Hall reporter Lynn Horsley, and our thanks to Eric Wesson of The Call. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, thank you for spending part of your weekend with us.